Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Spiritual Brainstorm episode 119. In this episode, I'd like to go into another mind-bending topic, which is multidimensional evolution. So, just to plunge a little bit more into this future, past, present relationship, everything happening at once, how does the past change and the future change, and all these things. So I've taken the liberty of actually pre-drawing this because drawing this live would have been a bit slow for you guys, I think. But you've basically seen this before. That is of course, the absolute in the absolute. Everything exists at the same time. And then when you go from the absolute to the relative, then you have a partial manifestation of the absolute, and the relative, it's almost this effect that I was talking about of the focus of a camera. It's as if the absolute was put a blur effect basically on itself, a blur effect, and through experience it sort of gains sharper and sharper focus as to what it actually was to start with. And of course, a focus effect, if you look at a focus effect, it happens simultaneously everywhere. It's not like an image focuses from right to left or bottom to top or something. There's no particular order. Everything comes into focus at the same time. And so here the image is right here. It's as if, the absolute was this very still kind of ocean. And going from the absolute to the relative, it's as if the absolute sort of plunged its finger at the center of itself, and then it created these ripples that stem from that initial impulse. And these ripples represent time, where the circle is source basically going from nothing to infinity. Like when it goes full circle, it's a full circle experience. It's like if you started somewhere here with, the past, and you go full circle until you reach here, the ultimate future, which goes back to source, because it's done everything it could. It from that kind of story. So it's imagine basically like a movie like The Lord of the Rings, and you can only have a story made up of 20 frames out of a 2-hour movie. And so you split those 20 frames here, and then you try to make a story out of that. And of course, it's going to be full of, mythology, magic, teleportation, all kinds of, weird stuff that you find in many of the myths that we have from very ancient religions, where you have, spirits of nature and all that stuff. Because ultimately there's no other way to sort of have that experience with that little material, so to speak. And you cannot differentiate that much between things. So like the mountain is one big spirit, and the river is one big spirit. And then the universe kind of evolves in all directions and expands in all directions. And it creates a story which is just a little bit more sophisticated because there are more frames here added. The relative becomes a bit sharper, and so you create more diverse elements. And so now instead of having just one big river spirit, now suddenly you have sub-spirits and different entities inside the river or the ocean and whatnot. And everything becomes a bit more complex and a bit longer, quote unquote. And so this process, like these lines that I've drawn, the green line, the red line, the blue line, are all like points of consciousness, that an experience that stems from source and surfs these waves as they expand. So imagine like every one starts in the middle, and then as the wave sort of expands, it surfs the wave as it goes outward, and so it advances in this fashion. You see, it's like, if imagine these waves were expanding, and you were a surfer that was on that wave, and you just were riding the wave outward in a spiral. And that's your experience as a soul, as a consciousness. That's the movement, so to speak, of creation. That's why you have movement. If you had it like, if you were trying to ride the wave like straight, then it would be strange. It would be like you were not moving at all, and your soul would be like morphing into all these different shapes, but without all of that complex interactions and experiences that we're having. So imagine if you were like static, and you were morphing from a chimp into a human, and then a human into an angel, and then an angel into whatever. That would be kind of strange. And so you add this kind of, spiraling motion outwards, where you can build a sort of an experience where time advances in this fashion, in a certain direction, or you have past, present, and future because of that movement. Otherwise, you'd be like stuck in it's almost like if the present were shifting, but there was no past, no future. It'd be kind of strange. So, thanks to this surfing experience, you can say that whatever is behind you is the past, and whatever is ahead of you is the future from your perspective. But this future here is one you will not experience. Because of course the wave is continuously expanding, and so the future that you will experience is something unpredictable, because it's going in here. It's very hard to predict what the future will be, because this is of yet unexplored. This is future potentials that are yet unexplored, whereas these potentials, these futures here, have already been explored by other, sort of, how should I say this, like timelines, I guess, but timeline is a pretty bad analogy, but maybe points of consciousness in this infinite kind of continuum, time continuum. This is like a time continuum right here, where all of this is interlinked, as I was talking in a few videos back. And so imagine you're here in 2022, and how do these timelines, quote unquote, or consciousness, how should I say, experiences interact with each other? And that is, every surfer here, every point of consciousness helps all the surfers behind it, and draws inspiration from all the ones forward from it to expand further and evolve continuously. So 2256 is a future timeline, which is happening now, of course, because that's where this bubble is expanded to. And in 2256, I'm just making this up, of course, but you have these gray aliens, which are humans originally, but degenerated because they were unable to stop overexploitation, pollution, and all, and climate change and all that stuff. And so the planet basically became more and more inhospitable, and they've evolved into being degenerated humans who can no longer reproduce because they've, been exposed to so much pollution, radiation, and stuff that they can. But they have still advanced technology, which allows them to visit humans on another timeline here in the past and do these abductions where they take their semen and whatnot and bring it back to their time so they can sort of survive. And by doing so, of course, the past is helping them evolve further, as I was saying. And what they're doing is, by interacting with the past, they're helping us avoid that timeline where we cannot stop climate change and we pollute and we're exposed to radiation, and steer clear of it and not experience becoming gray degenerate aliens, but something better. And from our timeline in 2022, what we're doing is we're sending signals into the past via examining our history and textbooks and all that stuff into another timeline in the past where the Russian Revolution just happened, and we're informing the past kind of unconsciously with other kinds of links that are much harder for me to explain, but nevertheless, that's how it works in my mind, where we're telling them all about the fact that Stalin made a coup at Lenin's death to take his place, and Stalin was a terrible dictator and horrible and all that stuff. And then we tell them about Hitler, and so that allows them, for instance, to for Trotsky, which was a much more intellectually sound kind of and mentally sound kind of person, to take control of the Soviet Union after Lenin died. And they also managed to assassinate Hitler before he reaches power. And then Trotsky, because he's much more rational and reasonable, manages to cooperate with capitalism and the West to find a kind of a compromise where both capitalism and communism evolve and learn from each other. And that sets humanity on an even better trajectory that avoids completely World War II and the Cold War and over like pollution and all that stuff and whatever. And again, like, you'll find yourself here, and then that continues on forever. And so that's how basically the universe evolves everywhere simultaneously. And what you think is a static past is actually a past that is constantly in flux, and that will help you and like inspire you, and you will you will maybe like draw lessons from that past that didn't exist for you, but now suddenly you discovered new things there, and you will inspire the past to not make the same mistakes that you did. So, for instance, I heard about this book, David Graeber, and how it was a myth that we were only hunter-gatherers, that there were no advanced civilizations in the past and all that stuff. Well, if you look at this model, then David Graeber and the recent discoveries is not just uncovering a static piece of history. It is as if, our history of the past was based on this kind of timeline here, where we were hunter-gatherers. And then when David Graeber comes along, we discover new evidence that there were advanced civilizations. But you're connecting to a totally different timeline, which has evolved. And thus, by studying, re-examining the past, you actually, how magical, you discover new evidence and new things. You like dig in the ground, and suddenly there's a new thing there that you've never seen before, and it teaches you that actually, there were very ancient civilizations in the past, and we've disguised that. So you understand that the past shifts constantly, as well as the future, all of it simultaneously, all of it to expand to make the absolute sort of focus in on itself and sharpen that image of what it is, and continuously evolve into that. And so looking here into like the perfect pasts, quote unquote, from 2022 backwards, you would have this materialist science past Big Bang timeline right here. And then, but if you look at where the humanity was 4,000 years ago, during like the Old Testament and Judaism, and the earth being 6,000 years old, you're looking into the past on a totally different timeline, which is this one. And then the way that it actually looks like is like these roots, you see? And these roots represent humanity's diverse sets of beliefs about the past, which cements our current reality. And so our current reality is basically like a giant consensus between billions of different perspectives on what the past of humanity is or was like. And that serves one purpose, is to stabilize us on that surfing board and to steer us into surfing in one direction or another going into the future, you see? Because where you plunge your roots into the past guides you towards a different future. Just like us, for instance, taking inspiration from the future here, from the gray aliens, steers us in a certain direction. The same applies in re-examining our past. That also influences us in how we surf these waves that are continuously pushing for continuous evolution, so to speak, of consciousness, of the absolute becoming more and more aware of itself as the absolute. Because remember, as this wave expands, it can encompass more and more of what the absolute is. Like you can fit more of what the absolute is, all of existence. You can fit more of existence as these circles sort of expand. And of course, once you reach a certain level, like humanity reaching a level of becoming a global organism, this 2D system becomes a 3D system. Oops. And you can start surfing this as you would surf on a sphere. And that sphere expands, but your freedom of movement is no longer this unidirectional past towards future linear timeline, but you can suddenly like circle around and go back into the past and then go back into the future. And of course, there's still rules governing how you can surf that sphere, but you're in a totally different kind of realm. Now your freedom of experience is multiplied like exponentially. And that's why gray aliens can actually reach out to the past, not just via these non-material, non-physical kind of intuitions that you send into the past, like I've exemplified here, but via physical interaction. They're capable of doing that, and we'll be capable of doing the same, but don't forget that once we become capable of doing it, we'll be somewhere here, and we'll be in a totally different reality as the Greys doing it from their vantage point here. The universe will have expanded, evolved, and transformed into something much more complex. And yeah, that's so yeah, it's kind of mind-bending, of course, and very difficult to explain clearly. I hope this was clear. I'm doing my best as usual. And so yeah, just remember that the past is shifting along with the future simultaneously, that there are virtually an infinite number of consciousnesses surfing this together, and all of them giving feedback all the time across all timelines. And so we receive feedback from the future just a year from now, but it's not a year from now on our timeline. It's a year from now on a different timeline, which is experiencing, war between Russia and Ukraine. And that helps us steer clear maybe of that experience or not. We'll see. But I'm just saying that that's basically what's happening all the time across all timelines. And that's how basically this universal consciousness is capable of evolving, because it's evolving at every single point simultaneously, and every single point is informing every other point in some kind of network on how to expand further by giving them feedback from the future or feedback from the past, new feedback from the past, because the past has changed a little bit. And that provides that impetus for evolving further and transforming and allowing to expand this consciousness. And so if you're from looking at this from the perspective of God, which is the perspective you're looking at it right now, God is aware of all the things that are happening along this timeline, and it's this sharpening effect of a camera, because it sees more and more of itself in that circle or sphere or hypersphere as it expands. And so it's not as if so this is also something really important. It's not as if these past ripples are now gone and don't exist anymore. They exist by virtue of all of the roots that you plant from your present into the past, and all the thoughts and the memories and all that stuff about the past. It's just that they're at a different quality now in terms of their existence. And then also the future, it's not as if the future, all of this is unexplored completely. It is explored, but in a very etheric way and not material way necessarily. So you can think of where the bubble has expanded as I will call it like the more material or solid reality. And then you just have various strata of or shades or variations on how the other ripples are being experienced as something that is more of a memory, or something that's more like your thoughts exploring the future, but that future experiments itself in a very light way, just like when you're dreaming, basically. And in not a very physical, tangible, solid, limiting kind of way, but a very free kind of exploration, where you can jump completely free, you can do whatever you want, but you don't have the intensity of the physical and material experience, because you're still in sort of exploration mode rather than experimentation mode. And so the future informs the present, the past informs the present, the future as in unexplored etheric thought in the astral informs the present, and the future in terms of solid future on a different timeline 200 years from now also informs the present. And this is all interlinked like an unimaginably complex network, which, is impossible to really represent accurately. So again, I apologize. I hope this is clear. Just don't hesitate to give me your feedback. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and talk to you in the next video.